name is Bob Bruner. I am one of her colleagues. I'm an extension educator with Purdue Extension, and I work in Clay and Owen counties, so right next door to Vigo County. I'm also an entomologist. I've been an entomologist now for about, I think, getting on 12 years, and I've worked in a lot of different situations. I've helped people in gardens, around granaries, in crop fields, and food distribution centers. So I've had the opportunity to see a lot of different things when it comes to the different kinds of insects that are going to influence our lives. One of the primary aspects of my job as an extension educator is to help people understand what a lot of these insects will mean to the things we do as humans. And unfortunately, a big portion of that is myth dispelling. And tonight, I'm going to hope that I can dispel some myths for all of you when it comes to these so-called murder hornets. So let's just dive right into this. Instead of referring to it as murder hornet, the entomologists you may know or may talk to about it's probably going to refer to this by its scientific name, Vespa mandarinia. This is an invasive species. It does not belong on this continent. It is from Asia. It is considered not nearly as problematic over there as it is over here because it has natural controls which prevent its population spread. Primarily, it tends to exist only in particular kinds of areas, usually something like lowland wooded habitats, and doesn't generally spread too badly into human habitats. Now, a little bit on why I chose to give you that scientific name is because I wanted to relate to you how hard it can be to really identify this particular invasive species. A few weeks ago, we heard about the murder hornet in the news, and I gave a good laugh when I heard this particular name. That was a new one to me. You'll also hear it referred to as the Asian giant hornet or the Japanese hornet and a few other names as well, which is why a lot of us tend to, those of us in the scientific community, I should say, tend to stick to the scientific names so we all know what we're talking about. But suffice it to say, here in the United States, if someone mentions the murder hornet, I think it's pretty safe to say they're going to be referring to this insect. Now, like I said, this is an invasive species in our area, but it will help us to understand how it normally lives, to be able to understand how it's going to influence us on the off chance that we ever see it. This is a predatory insect. It is totally predatory. It will attack small to medium-sized insects, including honeybees. They typically will make nests at the ground level where they will take their prey to be able to feed their own broods that are located in a hive-like nest underground. And I've got a few pictures of that I'm about to show you. These insects are particularly unique in that when they do choose to attack honeybees, they've evolved a behavior that entomologists refer to as a slaughter phase. This is kind of like when a group of sharks begin to frenzy in the water around prey. When even as few as 3 of these hornets gather and they're gathering around a beehive, they'll enter this phase where they just start killing every bee in sight. And they can actually destroy a beehive, just 3 of them, in a matter of a few short hours. This is why this insect is so feared right now in the United States, because a lot of people are worried, will this impact our bee industry? Now, to just lay some fears to rest right now, only 2 colonies at the time that I'm giving this talk and my reading have been discovered within the North American continent. One of those colonies was discovered in Washington State. Another of them was discovered near Vancouver. The 2 colonies that were discovered were not found to be genetically related to each other. This means that most likely the colonies were accidentally brought here from 2 different sources, most likely from human activity, shipping products, moving some kind of wood or other material, and they were just accidentally brought here and nobody realized it until the colonies began to develop. There is no indication that they have spread beyond those points. So as much as the news may want you to believe that this is a big issue right now, it's just not. There is no sign that these have spread whatsoever. So I mentioned earlier their nests. And this is something that, before I get to the nesting, here's an example of some of their eating behaviors, what you're looking at right here. And I know the picture is kind of gross. You're looking at one of the Asian giant hornets that has captured a praying mantis. Now keep in mind, that praying mantis is practically an apex predator in its own right. And one of these murder hornets has basically ripped it up pretty good and is now using it as a food source. So in their natural habitat, the murder hornet is the apex predator, which is why we're going to have some concerns if it does actually begin to spread, because that would be a big upset to our local ecosystems. Now, as for their nesting behavior, they will make nests in the ground, and they may be kind of hard to notice if you don't actually see one of the hornets nearby. Now take a good look at that picture. You can see one of the hornets resting on what looks like a dead branch or maybe a living branch that's in contact with the ground. That hornet is about 3 inches in length. It is massive compared to most of the insects that we deal with here in Indiana. If you see one of these hornets, you will know that you have seen one. They are very, very large. Their nests are also quite large because you can kind of see the cavity that's under this tree root area. But what you don't see is the actual structure of the nest from the inside. This image is showing you the structure of that nest right here. All of these little divots you see are brood cells where they develop their young, kind of like what you would see with a honeybee. Except in this case, what they do is that they bring their food back to their brood to be able to eat. Remember, these are all predatory, so what they do is they capture prey. They make sure that the prey is no longer capable of struggling or attacking them, and they'll just bring it right back to their young to eat. There is a little bit of social behavior here that's been seen, but that's not unusual amongst wasp species. Now, one of the big things that you may be concerned about that I haven't yet addressed is this dangerous to me? I've gotten this question many times in the last few weeks. Murder hornets can be potentially dangerous to human beings, especially those who have an allergy to the venom of other insects like bees, wasps, things like that. They all belong to the same group as the murder hornet. However, in order for one to sting you, you have to work at it. You will need to prove yourself to be a pest by either attacking their nest or attacking them in the air. Usually, wasps of this size, it takes a lot of work to get them angry enough to actually attack you, with one exception. I'm going to talk a little bit about that exception shortly. In short, most likely, you are never going to see a murder hornet. I will be very surprised if they spread rapidly at all across the United States, and considering the fact that they're coming from the west, they would have to get past the Rocky Mountains first. Now, while it is possible that human beings could accidentally transport them, when you're talking about an insect that's 2 to 3 inches in size and is very actively predatory, it's really hard to create situations where an insect like that is going to be able to hide and survive in an overseas crossing. So the instances in which we've seen it are kind of one-offs. Most likely, I don't think we're ever going to really experience this as a problem. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to give you guys some information on insects that are going to resemble the murder hornet. Most likely, you have seen a lot of really big wasps flying around, and you've been concerned because you're thinking, is this it? Is this one of these hornets that the news says that I need to be on the watch for? So let's just go over a few of those right now. So I've selected 3 other insects beside the murder hornets here, and I'm going to go by them slide by slide. And what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at the way their bodies are shaped and the way that their color patterns are. These insects all have very different color patterns, even though their shapes are somewhat similar. These color patterns will help you understand what you're looking at a little bit better. And while I know a lot of you may not necessarily take the time to look at the color patterns of insects you know might sting you, you can always get pictures. You can always look these up online. And you can always bring samples into your extension educators to help you figure out what you're looking at. So first, let's just go back to our Asian giant hornet, our murder hornet. If we take a look at its head, we can see that it's got a really bright orange-yellow head and a really, really dark thorax, that middle body segment where the wings and the legs are attached. And then if you go to the abdomen, the back end of the insect, you can see that this has lots of striping on it between that same orangey yellow and black stripes. And this pattern holds pretty true across all Asian giant hornets. They're not going to change color patterns very easily. The other thing to keep in mind about an Asian giant hornet is, again, its size. It is 2 to 3 inches in length. Keep that in mind. Look at the palm of your hand and measure out 2 to 3 inches right now. Give yourself an idea of how big that is. Most likely you have never in your life seen an insect that size, and I as an entomologist have only seen a few. So that should give you some idea of what we're dealing with here. Now, one of our largest native species that we deal with here in Indiana is something we refer to as a cicada killer. This one is very common throughout Indiana, whether you're in an urban area like Terre Haute or whether you're out in the boonies in the middle of the county like Clay County. This insect is almost completely harmless to human beings. It is quite large. It can get up to probably about 2 inches in length, and it can sting. However, to get this insect, to get a cicada killer wasp that actually sting you, you have really, really got to make an effort. I mean, like, hold it in your hand and try to squeeze. And at that point, it may decide to sting you to try to get you to go away. Cicada killers have a unique behavior, and it's all in their name. What they do is they hunt cicadas. You won't see any cicada killer wasp until you hear cicadas singing in the trees, and that's going to be happening before too long, if it hasn't already happened in some areas. What they do is their stinger is loaded with a paralytic venom that they will inject into their prey, a cicada, and then they're just going to take that now paralyzed cicada and drag it back to their nest as food for their young. Now, these are ground nesting wasps. You could see the opening to a cicada killer nest right here. You may actually be able to find these in your yard right now if you have active cicadas. And also, take a look at that dirt that's sitting there right outside that hole. Do you see the 2 ruts that are in the dirt? That is where the cicada killer dragged the cicada down into the hole. Now, while that may seem a little disturbing to you, keep in mind, these guys are specialized. They will only ever do this to a cicada who, by the way, is a pest insect on trees. So they're actually doing you a favor. They're helping keep things a little bit under control. So while they may look very scary when you see them fly around because they look like a B-52 bomber flying through the air, they are completely harmless. And again, let's just take a step back for a moment. Look at the body patterning. Look how this insect appears. Compared to the Asian giant hornet, this body is a little more streamlined. The head color isn't as prevalent. You could see really more of the eyes in this one. And while you can see striping on its body that's black and yellow, those patterns are very different. They aren't straight stripes. There's actually some kind of pattern there. Kind of like a Rorschach test if you look at its abdomen. So this is a very different insect that you're dealing with in this case. Now let's talk about one of our native hornet species. Well, technically this one isn't native. This one is actually from Europe. It is known as the European hornet. It is another one of our very, very large insect species here in Indiana. This one probably gets to, I would guess, about 1.5 inches in size. So take a look at its body again. Look at where the eyes are on the head. Look at the pattern on its abdomen. You can see kind of a teardrop pattern almost on the black shading on the abdomen. The eyes look a little bit different compared to that of the cicada killer and very different compared to the Asian giant hornet. Now, our European hornets are very common. They're usually found around pines and other trees because they like to dwell in cavities formed by trees. So they share a behavior with the Asian giant hornet. However, they're not nearly as large. And these can sting you. If you decide to get too close to their nest, they will become aggressive and attack you. So you'll want to take care. If you're concerned that you have hornets, You can always find one of these dead on the ground outside somewhere and bring it to your extension educator or grab a picture. But I virtually guarantee you, most likely the hornet species you'll see are almost all European hornets. Another thing that I want to make sure is clear with this, and this picture doesn't really show it very well, is that the abdomen is very orange on this insect. When you see it flying, you'll see that flash of orange on its, I'm sorry, not abdomen, its thorax. You'll see that very obviously if it's flying through the air. It will also appear a little bit thicker as compared to, say, a cicada killer. Now, this is an example of the nest that European hornets form, and you could see the kind of papery appearance of it. You could see that it's in the hollow of a tree. Now, on occasion, you will see these nests free hanging from trees or attached to the walls of various buildings like your barns. The best thing to do, don't try to take them down by yourself. These insects will attack you if you represent a threat. They are trying to defend their young. And if you are allergic to any kind of venom produced by bees or wasps, they will put you in the hospital or possibly cause an anaphylactic reaction. Get help before you do something about this. I would strongly prefer you contact your extension educator and maybe even a professional exterminator rather than try to remove these with some store-bought product yourself. These do represent a danger if you do not handle them correctly. But also keep in mind, European hornets have been around for years and we've been dealing with them fairly well. Okay, this will be our last insect that I'm going to go over here so I can leave enough time for questions. This one is probably the most well-known of all the insects that we're going to talk about this evening. Every one of us has had an experience with the yellow jackets, I'm sure. This is the yellow jacket, a wasp, just like all of the other insects I've talked about tonight, because yes, hornets are technically wasps. These should be fairly easy to tell apart from any other insect. Yellow jackets are their name. They are very bright yellow with very obvious black patterns on their bodies. Now, if you look at the abdomen, you could see that there's a unique pattern of shapes that are the color black on the abdomen. And you may wonder, well, is this a hornet? However, if we go back to our hornet picture, you can see that that black shading has that two teardrop shapes that are on the abdomen. Whereas if we go to our yellow jacket here, you could see just one large shape with two little dots as you go down the length of the abdomen. The other thing to keep in mind is that yellow jackets are not that big. At most, they may get an inch long. Yellow jackets, however, unfortunately, are quite aggressive. If you get near their nest, they will attack you. And unfortunately, they're pretty common throughout all of Indiana, especially here in southern Indiana. So what I would advise is if you see these guys buzzing above a point in your yard, you are going to want to take care of them, because if you mow your lawn and you drive over their nest, they will attack you. Now, the good thing is that they're not going to attack unless you mess with them. If you see one buzzing around near you, leave it alone. Don't mess with it, and it will buzz off and go away. They are just trying to find food. But if you need to get rid of the nest, there are a few things you can do. These aren't nearly as dangerous as hornets. You can get some store-bought products to try to help you remove it. I have seen some things where people have reported good results of just flooding the area because these are ground-dwelling insects. So what they did is they just set up their hose so it would flood their nest and force them to go to another place. The only thing I would recommend is if you choose to do that to try to remove yellow jackets, keep in mind you're disturbing their nest. So if you're anywhere near it when you flood it, they are going to come right after you. Sometimes I jokingly tell people yellow jackets were born angry. In short, with all of these insects, they are only going to be a threat if you mess with them. So please use your best judgment. These animals are just doing what they evolved to be able to do. And in almost every instance, if you don't mess with them, they are not going to mess with you, as long as you don't get in between them, their young, or potential food source. Before you choose to take action with them, please, please contact your extension educator. I've put my contact information up there on the screen for you to see there, and some photo credits because I can't take credit for these images you saw tonight. Just get some information before you take action. These insects do have their dangers. but with just a little bit of care, they're not going to be a threat to you or your family. All right, so I have left us about 10 minutes for getting some questions, so I am right on time.
Way to go, Bob.
All right, yeah, I'm having a great day.
Did anyone have any questions for Bob that, because we're a smallish group today, you can unmute yourself if you'd like and just go ahead and shout out if you have a question for our speaker.
I promise, guys, I have gotten all kinds of very weird questions. Even if it's not related to the insects I talked about tonight, feel free, just go ahead and ask.
Bob, could you, while we give people a minute to think, could you mention or kind of touch on the app? I think I said that correctly.
Could you repeat that, Dana? You actually cut out a little bit there.
Sorry about that. The Gledin app where you can report invasives.
Oh, yes. So this is a great app. Dana referred to it as the Gledin app. This is actually something that is being used by a lot of people who work in invasive species. What this does is when you use it, you can report in when you see something that may be invasive, whether it's an insect, an animal of some kind, or especially plants. You can find this, I believe that if you're an Android user, this app hasn't changed at all. I think if you're an iPhone user, it may have changed recently if you already have it, so you may need to re-download it. This is an incredibly great thing because it helps out people who work in this industry to make sure that we can work to eradicate these species if they ever arrive in our state. And while I say that the murder hornet will probably never get here to Indiana, should it ever do so, an app or a system like this will be incredibly important to making sure that we can get there, get this contained, and get it removed as soon as possible. Is that about what you were looking for, Dana?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Did anyone else have questions?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
This is Ruth. What happened to those 2 colonies that were found? Did they destroy them, or are they still around?
No, they destroyed them. They are invasive species, so they represent a potential threat to the ecosystems they were discovered in, and they are a threat to beekeepers. So they were destroyed as soon as they were found.
Okay, thanks.
Bob, could you repeat where those 2 colonies were found again, please?
So I am doing this from memory a little bit. You can look it up too to find some information. I use the Pennsylvania State Extension Services information on this if you ever want to look it up on your own. But the colonies were discovered, I believe, in the Washington State area as well as the Vancouver area. So one in the United States and one in Canada.
Did we have any more questions? If not, this is the first time I've done it, so bear with me, but I'm going to launch a poll, and I would appreciate if you participated. So go ahead and take a minute to fill those guys in. And while you guys are filling that out, I want to mention the next piece of our summer series, which is Fall Vegetable Production Gardening, which will be on July 21st at 6:30 p.m. And our speaker will be Brett Mischler, who is the garden manager out at World Gospel Church. He's been working with Extension. He's been working with the food prescription program in our office, all to get really high quality food, locally produced, out to people who need it. So I asked him to talk about what do you pick out to put in your garden that you do on that large scale size, all for the people in the community who need it the most. So it promises to be a great presentation. He's presented with the Master Gardeners before, a great engaging speaker, and I really look forward. So I will be advertising that with the Master Gardeners. I'm going to put it on our Facebook page. I'm also going to put a press release in the newspaper. So this program is once again July 21st at 6:30 p.m. So we'll go for about 10 more seconds just to give everyone a chance, because I'd hate to cut somebody off. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the polling. Thank you so much for participating. As I mentioned before, this program is recorded and I will post it to our YouTube channel. If you type into a search engine, Purdue Extension Vigo County YouTube, then it takes you straight to our page and you're able to see all the videos that we work very hard to produce. And this will be one of those videos up there. So enjoy your evening. It promises to be a beautiful sunny day, not too hot. Maybe you can go ahead and squeeze in a walk, but enjoy your afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks all, you were great.